They decided to hold Gertrude, her children, Hobbs, and Hubbard, all without bail pending their trials, so they could figure out what the hell went down in this house. An examination and autopsy of Sylvia's body revealed numerous burns, bruising, muscle, and nerve damage, and all of her fingernails were broken backwards, and most of her outer layer of skin on her entire body was peeled off. Sylvia also had severed her lips from being thrown against the walls where she was accidentally biting her mouth or biting her lip out of pain, probably. She had holes in her lips from that. When they performed the autopsy, they found that she was a virgin still. Now, that's controversial on its own because the whole theory of your hymen breaking has sort of been proven to be a myth. Anything can make it break. That has, many people can break it at a very young age, and apparently it can heal as well. Like, that doesn't say whether or not you're a virgin. However, it was proven that her hymen was still intact somehow through all of this, and the most messed up part of that is that in order to find that out, they had to check her down there, and her opening down there was swollen shut from all the abuse she had been through, especially with the Coca-Cola bottle incidents. The official cause of death was brain swelling, internal hemorrhage of the brain, and shock from severe and prolonged damage to her skin. Now, during the trial, Gertrude denied being responsible for Sylvia's death. She pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and she claimed that she was too distracted by her ill health and depression to control what her children were doing. So she blamed her kids for all of this. Now, the 4 minors who were put on trial for this also were the oldest daughter, Paula, I believe the oldest son, John, who at the time of the trial was 13, Richard Hobbs, who was 15, and Coy Hubbard, who was 15. The attorneys for the minors claimed that they had been pressured by Gertrude to be involved. When Gertrude's 11-year-old daughter, Mary, was called to the stand, she broke down and admitted that she had been forced to heat the needle in which Coy and Gertrude had carved Sylvia's skin with. She also testified that she had seen her mother beating Sylvia and forcing her into the basement. On May 19th of 1966, Gertrude was convicted of first-degree murder. She was spared the death penalty and was given life imprisonment. Paula, who had given birth to a daughter during the trial, don't forget she was pregnant during this whole ordeal, was convicted of second-degree murder, and she was also sentenced to a life imprisonment. The other remaining 3, Richard Hobbs, Coy Hubbard, and John Baniszewski, were all convicted of manslaughter and given 2 to 21 prison sentences, varying between the 3 of them. However, each of the boys served 2 years in a reformatory before being paroled in 1968. In 1971, Gertrude and Paula were granted another trial, largely because of the media's circus, I guess you could call it, around the trial, saying that it probably led the jury to put her as guilty a little too quickly and sort of make up the jury's mind before the trial even started. So she was given another trial, as they thought was fair. During the second trial, Paula pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, and she was released a year later. So she admitted, yes, I did this, and, I guess she got a shorter sentence because of it. Gertrude still was convicted of the first-degree murder and still sentenced to life in prison. However, over the course of the next 14 years in prison, she became a model prisoner, they say, and even sort of became a den mother and was referred to as Mom by the other prisoners. She was up for parole in 1985. Now, people in Indiana were pissed about this. People who weren't even alive at the time of the murder heard about this and obviously were livid at the thought this woman would ever get out. There was a lot of protests, a lot of pickets, things like that to sort of, beg to keep her behind bars. Unfortunately, that did not happen. She was granted parole. So this evil bitch, if you'll excuse my language, was let out. During the hearing, she said, "I'm not sure what role I had in it because I was on drugs. I never really knew her, but I take full responsibility for whatever happened to Sylvia." So at least she did seem to come around. She was probably, dealing with a lot of, again, mental illness, postpartum. Not that that's any excuse, because it's not. But she obviously was not in the right frame of mind. So hopefully she was rehabilitated, but I have my doubts with that, as many people do. And regardless of that, you were a grown woman who took the life of a child. This wasn't a child who murdered somebody. This wasn't a child who purposely or accidentally murdered somebody. That's a whole different story. 17-year-olds being involved in murder, it's disgusting, it's sick, but can you imagine being 80 and still being in prison for a stupid thing you did when you were 17? However, this woman was in her 30s, close to 40 when she did this. So, for her to be let out, I think is ridiculous. That's my own opinion, though. The parole board took her good behavior into account when they let her go, and she was voted in favor of her freedom at a 3-2 vote. So she barely made it out, but she did make it out. She was released from prison on December 4th of 1985, and she traveled to Iowa, where she called herself Nadine von Fossen, and that's her middle name and her maiden name put together, so she went by that instead. She lived there in obscurity until her death in Laurel, Iowa from lung cancer on June 16th of 1990 at the age of 60. When Jenny Likens found out of her death, she clipped the newspaper article out and sent it to her parents and said, I have some good news. Like, she was happy that the woman was dead. Jenny sadly passed away at the age of 54. This was June 23rd, 2004. Jenny passed away of a heart attack. Richard Hobbs died of cancer in January of 1972 at the age of 21, 4 years after being released from the reformatory. John Baniszewski began calling himself John Blake, and in 2005 he passed away of diabetes in Pennsylvania at the age of 52. Coy Hubbard, who was Stephanie's boyfriend, the second oldest girl, was in and out of prison after his release. He was later charged with the murder of 2 men, but was acquitted of this murder. He died of a heart attack on June 23rd in 2007 at the age of 56 in Shelbyville, Indiana. Paula, the eldest of the 7 children, received a prison sentence of 20 years to life for her part in Sylvia's death, and her baby daughter, who she named Gertrude, was born while she was in jail and was later adopted. In 1971, Paula tried twice unsuccessfully to escape from prison, and in 1972 she was paroled and assumed a new identity. Now this part's crazy. I heard about this recently. This happened a while ago, but I heard it recently. She eventually married and had 2 children with her husband, and she still is alive today. She lives in Iowa in a small town somewhere. I forget what her name was changed to, but if you Google it, it's easy to find. She had changed her name, and she became an aide to a school counselor for 14 years in a school district in Iowa. Here it is. She changed her name to Paula Pace, and she lied to the school district when applying for the job. She was fired in 2012 when the school found out who she was and the fact that she lied about it. So she was working in a school for 14 years. Now, the murder charge against Stephanie was dropped after she turned the state's evidence against the other defendants. She basically said, that was all my brothers and sisters. I didn't have anything to do with that. I didn't want her to die. I tried to help her. Whatever. She assumed a new name as well and became a school teacher. She is married and has several children. As far as I know, she is still alive as well. I don't know where she's residing these days. The house where all this happened was at 3850 East New York Street in Indianapolis, or right outside of Indianapolis. It stood vacant and run down for many years after the murder. There was discussion of renovating it and using it as a women's shelter, so sort of, taking the evil of it and making it into a good place. However, the funds never came through for that project. In 2009, the house was finally demolished, and it is now a parking lot for a church that is, I think, across the street. If I remember, I'll put in a clip of Google Maps of it because I found it recently. So as we can see here, we are right outside of Indianapolis looking at the house. We're going to zoom in here and you'll see a gravel parking lot. That is where the house used to stand up until 2009. The White House that we're looking at now is the neighboring home to the Baniszewskis. So this lot was where the house that Sylvia passed away in had previously been. Across the street over here, I believe is the church that uses the parking lot, and then some just surrounding areas, but this is all that is left. But that house was still standing until 2009, which is insane. And people have videos on YouTube where you can see them peeking inside the basement and everything. Like, it's pretty open and you could see in there where everything happened. A 6-foot-tall block of granite was dedicated in June of 2001 as a memorial to Sylvia. That's in Willard Park at 1700 East Washington Street. And the dedication was attended by several hundred people. So that is the awful, terrible, sad story of the death of Sylvia Likens. There was no reason for it. It was just disgusting and sad and so just awful what this poor girl went through in her final days. Again, if you're interested in seeing a movie version of it, I highly recommend that American Crime. As usual, please like this video and comment below if you have any requests or suggestions on cases, anything really that you'd like to hear about, paranormal, true crime, behind the music, anything like that. I am happy to do so. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.